Good evening to another episode of the Alex and Mo podcast. And tonight we have Dr. Kate Taylor Adkins. Hey, Taylor, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are y'all?
Pretty good. Can't complain. Don't worry, let him back. He's excited to be here.
It's
All
his
right.
first podcast episode, probably. The man's
It is.
excited.
He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do.
So, Taylor, we're glad to have you on the show. We met at CSM in Boston, and
Yes.
we had a very interesting conversation when we met. Alex, even to the wee hours of the morning. But Taylor, I never got the backstory
Yeah.
of how and why you became a physical therapist, and what sparked your interest in starting XC3. And my third question following that would be, why a not-for-profit versus a paid business? You know, we all would like to make money. So, so give us a backstory.
Yeah. One, do love money. I'll get back to that. Um, so YPT, I in high school tore both of my ACLs about 6 months apart. I had in hindsight, probably a mediocre physical therapist. I was told I was cleared, whatever that meant, and to me, cleared when I was 14 meant that I could go back and do everything. And 2 months into that, tore my other ACL. So pretty much ran my own program and had an interest in it. I like anatomy, I like the body and all that stuff. So went to Georgia Southern for undergrad and majored in exercise science. Did not have the best advisor, which is going to be important later. Um, and so I was kind of figuring stuff out on my own. I knew I wanted to go into physical therapy, did not know how I was going to get there, and just put in an application kind of on a whim to see what would happen. Of course, it didn't go anywhere because it takes a lot of energy and effort and references, and PTCAS is a whole beast to navigate and all that stuff. So for 3 years, I tried. I got interviews the second go round, and that second time, it was for a program that wasn't accredited yet. And so it was, I weighed the pros and cons. It was kind of risky. And my parents were like, absolutely not. You're not going to spend that amount of money to go to a school that's not accredited. And I mean, that school ended up getting their accreditation. So it wasn't an issue. It wouldn't have been an issue, but still, there was a risk associated with that I wasn't willing to take. And then third time's a charm. I actually reached out, got some help, got some feedback on applications and essays and all of that stuff, and had some people help me along the way. And that's how I actually got into PT school at Mercer. And then, from there, just kind of navigating what PT looks like as a Black woman. I think there's been enough, how do I say, enough publicity around like how educated Black women are, and not enough emphasis on how much goes into us getting to where we are. So when I started, there was one person that I met that kind of changed my trajectory a little bit. Her name was Catherine. Her name is Catherine Sylvester, and she was the first Black woman I saw that was involved in APTA. She was in APTA Georgia at the time. She was doing a lot for minorities, and that kind of sparked my interest, I think, in dealing with and trying to grow the profession as far as people who look like me. Because in a class of 38 that's set for 38, there were 7 Black students and 2 Asians. That was the most that our program had ever had. And if I'm frank, I think it might be the most that they will have for at least the near future. Our, I think my class had difficulty understanding the complexities of Black people. So they didn't understand that all of us could be different. Like, we weren't all best friends. And like, that was some wild and crazy thing, I guess. So from there, transitioning to Exceed 3, I saw a need. Like, my struggle was real trying to get into PT school. And there's not enough, if you don't have good advisors, which I'm finding the more I talk to students, most of them don't in undergrad. So trying to make sure that you're giving the best advice that you can in helping students along who are truly interested in the profession. Not the students who are looking to get doctor in front of their name by any means necessary, because those are different things. And, you know, looking at CAPTE data and what APTA will publish, it's always interesting what people are willing to put in writing. But the data that's published from 2012 to 2020, when I graduated from PT school, there had been consistently 3% or less African-American students enrolled in and graduating from PT schools. In 2021, that grew to 4%. I believe the 2022 data shows just barely over 5%. But when you think about how vast our profession is, and you think about what our population across America looks like, that number should be different. So that was my interest in starting Exceed 3. And then to your last question of why non-for-profit, I don't know what drives this in me, but I don't feel comfortable profiting off of someone I'm trying to help. It's the same thing as if you give somebody $1 on the side of the road and you stick a camera in their face, or you're feeding someone who's homeless and you stick a camera in their face. Are you really doing good? It doesn't sit right in my spirit for whatever reason. I just do not like it. I've heard of some programs. I'm not going to call them by name because I don't know them by name. I have a student that I've been working with who we're trying to get, GPA and GRE scores up and all those things. And she utilized a service that she found on Instagram, and their advice to her, they had different like tiers of information that they would offer for several thousands of dollars. And the advice was to just go to whatever PT school you get into. And I personally think that's terrible advice, because what if their teaching style doesn't fit your learning style? And you're spending how much money and you're relocating to Wyoming? Like that's silly. And so I don't see how that helps us as a people if I'm trying to profit off of you and give you bad advice. That's just silly to me. So it's nonprofit. And I will clarify, nonprofit does not mean that we do not make money. Nonprofit means when I report it to the tax services, to IRS, it looks a little different on paper. It doesn't mean I don't make money.
Got you.
So yeah.
So back up a little bit, because that was a lot of info you just gave us. All good stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to chop up there. So my first thing is, you graduated undergrad at Georgia Southern, correct?
Correct.
So from the time you graduated at Georgia Southern, 3 years went by before you got into PT school?
Yep.
Okay.
I finished in 2014. I started Mercer in 2017.
And those 3 years, you had obstacles in just going through the process, correct? Mm-hmm. But you see, obviously, you've kind of dated yourself, so you're definitely younger than Mo and I are.
Way younger.
Yeah, way younger. So see, like you had to deal with PT CAS, right? Like Mo and myself, we didn't have any of that. So like hearing your story is kind of obviously good to hear, but totally different perspective from like my personal story that I'll briefly share with you, right? So I went to Florida State for my undergrad, graduated from Florida State. I knew the whole time that I was at Florida State that physical therapy was what I wanted to do, only because my high school athletic trainer was like, you don't want to do this. Like, this lifestyle is not one that I would recommend. The money is but look at physical therapy. Mind you, my high school athletic trainer is now the head athletic trainer, director of all sports medicine at the University of Miami. So this is somebody who's very well known. So anyway, so I go through undergrad. Whole time I know I'm going to PT school. My last year of PT school of undergrad, I'm like, all right, well, I got to start applying. So clearly there's no PT CAS. There's nothing. I'm just kind of looking up different programs as to kind of like you said, where I would want to live or where makes the most sense for me to live. Right. So I'm originally from Miami. I'm living in Tallahassee. We I visited Atlanta a lot because I had friends there. So we would in Tallahassee to Atlanta, not that far. So
Right.
I applied at Georgia State.
Mhm.
Had an interview. Did I have an interview? I don't think I did. So apply to Georgia State. I get put on a wait list. Mind you, I'm doing this all on my own because it's kind of how I applied to college to begin with. I just kind of looked it up, figured out what I needed to do, went ahead and did it. You mentioned advisor. Not once did I speak to anybody at Florida State about how to go about getting into PT school. I think the only time I met with somebody is because I was forced to
To
at
get your
the
classes.
like at the beginning, like my first year. Because after that, I didn't even meet with them. Like I knew enough of what to do and how to go about doing it on my own. So apply to Georgia State. I get put on a wait list. I applied to Florida International because I was like, living in Miami kind of as a backup, moved back in with my parents. Wasn't too thrilled about that idea, but whatever. And I applied to the University of South Florida, which is where I ended up going. And I got accepted there. It was the charter DPT class. For whatever, that sounded very cool to me. I'm like, oh, I'll be the first one to do this. But that was the process, right? Like there wasn't anything of what you've described, but now it's like a whole new world. Like all I've ever heard, I was briefly a faculty member, so I was on the other side of it at USF. So I'm trying to guide students to PTCAS and undergrads coming to me to like, how do I go about this process? And it never once occurred to me that people like yourself and others have these difficulties about getting obviously the PT school, but maybe other professions or other ways about how to trying to make the transition. So definitely very interesting to see that for you. And I'm a believer in everything happens for a reason. That it took you those 3 years per se to kind of, find your lane and get into your space, because who knows, why you were held back, right? Well, I'm saying we're not going to go down that route, but we all know somebody has a bigger plan for you, and this was just part of that process. For some, it could have been like, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I've done it now 2-3 years. Like I need to, you're kind of let me go, let me get ready into life, or let me get into what I want to. And you're like, no, I'm gonna stay with it. I'm gonna stay with it. So what
I'm
was
seeing that a lot more too with
what
students now. I'm seeing it a lot more.
What, that is taking that length of time to get in?
Yeah, it's taking that length of time, and they're on that verge of, okay, do I give up or do I just keep put my head down and chug forward?
So what do you tell them though? Because I mean, I'm sure we'll discuss it, and it happens. I mean, I don't know how active you're on Twitter, but it's discussed a lot. It's like, is PT something now that we can continue to recommend to up and coming students, right? Like, I think that's a valid conversation.
Hey, we're getting old. We need people to take care of us.
but like I've made the argument
but
myself. I've made the argument myself to where it's like, I don't even know if I would tell up and coming, students to say, hey, this is the route you want to go. Like, we've got a lot of obstacles, and no matter how you want to cut it, the finances play a role. So what are you telling your students and the people that you're working with as to why they should continue on that track when they're having to wait several years?
So I think it's a very personal decision. I can tell you mine was dictated primarily by my age. I didn't want to be the oldest person in my class. I said if I wasn't in by 25, I wasn't going, which was silly. My brother had already talked me out of that by the time I started finishing it coming out of my mouth. But that's how it worked out for me. I generally will tell my students, make a pros and cons list. I have a student who I don't think she'll mind me sharing her story. Her dad was a PT, and unfortunately, he passed away. So it's deeply personal for her to kind of continue on what he was doing. And so, if you have something that's like that, then yeah, maybe you take a step back. I was working the entire time that I was trying to get into PT school, working full time in a job I hated, but it paid well. And so okay, how can you take advantage of this time? Say it right now is not your time. How do you take advantage of it? We know it's expensive. How do you stack money? How do you go ahead and get yourself prepared in other ways? Because life is still lifing. Life is still happening. We don't have, unlimited amounts of time. We also don't have unlimited amounts of funds. So what can you do to prepare what that process is going to look like? Because I can tell you right now, most programs are recommending that you aren't working while you're in PT school. So how can you best prepare yourself for that side of things? Because those are the things they don't tell you. And I think it's possible. I had people in my class who did. One of my classmates was a respiratory therapist. And so he was working 2 12-hour days every weekend to make sure he was good financially. And so like it's doable. So what can you do? And I try to encourage people either way, because I think the big thing with students, a lot of times they want to be told what to do. And if you're going to be a PT, I need you to think for yourself and go ahead and start that clinical reasoning now. How can you lay out what you need to do? How can you lay out and hold yourself accountable to that? Because accountability is hard, especially when there's nobody else to do it for you. Accountability is really hard. So the number of students I've had is like, oh, well, I'm still retaking the GRE. I'm still studying. Okay, what does your studying actually look like? I've had a couple of students that I've helped with the boards. You're studying, but I'm looking at your screen time on your phone and you're on TikTok for what, 7 hours a week? How you studying? Because you still work. So where's your time actually going? And having students like take that step back. Let's look at what your habits are and do you really want to do this? Because I can tell you that it's hard. But I can also tell you that I'm across the finish line. So whether or not, whatever I tell you, if it resonates or it doesn't, my day still goes on. You have to make that choice as to what you want to get out of our time together, and also what you want out of your life. If you don't want it for real, don't start. It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense to throw away that money.
So,
and that's
Taylor,
yeah.
Taylor, you made some comments. Like for me, I got homesick when I first came here to go to school. So your location, where you choose to go to school, matters. Also,
100%.
you want to choose a program where you will feel seen and heard, because
Correct.
Going through PT school it's really challenging. And if you have professors who cannot find it with themselves to empathize with what you're going through, it's going to be even tougher. So
Correct.
that's why a lot of people struggle. So do you take all those things into consideration when you recommend programs to students who come to you seeking advice, preparing for PT school? And also, how much does the average cost of PT class applying now cost for PT
I can't
program?
even tell you PT class. I know it depends on if they have waivers or not. It's, I want to say the last number I remember a student mentioning to me was between $135 and $140 per application. And there's like a prorated amount per additional one that you add on. So it's not like your base amount is like $140, and then for every one that you add on, it's not prorated for each one, but different programs will have different costs associated with them. When I'm telling people, or if I have someone asking for advice about like where to go, or if location matters, one, absolutely yes it does, because like you said, one of the bigger challenges to me is that, or at least anecdotally in Georgia, we have the same person I mentioned before, Catherine Sylvester, started something called the Minority Mentoring Program, and that was through APTA Georgia. And the thing that she found, and kind of anecdotally at least, when there were multiple minority students in a PT program in Georgia, when she started this, at least one of them was going to drop from the program. And it was never because of grades. It was because of the lack of support. And so how that program functions matters. I tell students, if you're getting an interview, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. The other thing with that, I think, is that we are so, like, as a society, like, focused on the finish line, that we don't do our due diligence and look at what the program is telling you. If you know that you're not someone that learns by like teaching yourself, don't go to a case-based program. Oh, but that's the only place I got in. Okay, well, if you got in there, you can get into another place. I think doing your due diligence and doing your research into not only what that program offers in the way of like support and who their faculty are and all that stuff, but how do they teach? What do their students say about how they teach? The students are a lot more willing to talk to you than you think they are. And during that whole process of trying to apply, talk to people, ask questions. If you look back at their last 4 or 5 classes and you don't see anybody that looks like you, it's probably a reason. Maybe ask those questions as to what those programs do to support students who look like you if you don't look like the majority of their cohorts. It's fair to ask those questions. And if they don't give you a good answer, or if you don't feel good when you go there for your interview, do not go. It is that simple. And I think again, I'm on the other side of things, so it's harder. I can tell you when I was applying, I applied to Georgia State, Emory, and Mercer. 2 of those are private. Georgia State never got called back from. Their admissions process, I don't know, it was rough getting in touch with their admissions folks. Emory, I went for the interview and felt like I was still in full-on competition mode. The thing that turned me off from them the most is when I went to get my name tag for the day. They didn't see my name on the list and asked me if I was sure what my name was. Red flag. I've been me my whole life. I know my name. I don't think that questioning whether or not I knew my name was going to be the way that made me think, oh yeah, this is a school for me. So immediately turned off from that. The interview itself with the professor was maybe, I think we got 5 to 10 minutes, and then the rest was us like walking around their campus and them showing us all the different labs and all the different research and all the other things. So they were really trying to sell their facilities and their program, but I didn't get much time to like actually talk about who I was, which again, red flag. And then when I went to Mercer, it felt comfortable. So if you can't go to your interview and feel comfortable, that's probably a red flag of how you're about to feel for the next 2.5 to 3 years. And something that you should probably take note of.
Well, I know for me, sorry, Alex, you could go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, Mo. I'm like, like Taylor, like all these items that she mentions, right, to things to look for. Mm-hmm. Did any of that cross your mind when you were going to PT school? And the reason I ask is, and I'm not, obviously, I've already established that I'm older, but it seems to me like
it's harder.
There's totally different just thought process, perspective, just outlook. I don't even know if I'm using the right words, but there's a clear distinction between Taylor and her peers and how they go about making decisions about their professional lives, their personal lives, that are probably a little different than how you and I went about things. And not necessarily one's right, one's wrong, or anything of the sorts, but it's more things I'm like, damn, I never thought of that. Like, I never thought to think of that. Obviously, my experience was different than Taylor's and different than Mo's and different than anybody else who's watching us, right? Like, we all have our own stories. But I'm just listening to her. I'm like, damn, like none of this ever came to mind. And I'm like, damn, I probably should have thought of that when I was going through the interview
it might have saved you some gray hair, right?
But it's just like, man, like things are just different. And again, not to say that one is right, one is wrong, or whatever, but it's different.
So for me, I only applied to one school. It was Howard or Bust. So they had better accepted me. So save money, and I knew I was gonna have the opportunity to have my tuition paid for if I stayed there. So that's why I went. But I honestly admire the things that you were looking out for. And even people, if you just graduated and you're looking for a job, those are things you want to
Same
pay
thing.
attention to, because
Yeah.
your job, the program that you choose, that's where you're going to spend the majority of your time, and you do not want to be miserable. If you're miserable in your DPT program, if you're miserable in your job, a lot of other things are going to suck too, and you don't want that. So be mindful, as Taylor said, look for things that you know could trigger you, and be like, hey, nah, this is a red flag. I have to proceed with caution. So I like that. Some people do not have the luxury of being selective. They want to get into a top program. They're going to do whatever it takes and suffer through it for 2.5 to 3 years and graduate, just because they want to have, I went to this school and I could now get this job or this residency. So if that works for you, that works for you. But if you want to be happy and have peace of mind, consider the things that Taylor has been mentioning, whether it's for applying for a PD program or applying for a job, even dating life. Look for stuff. That's where you spend the majority of your time. So do that.
Yeah.
Taylor,
So great advice, Taylor.
How long have you had, or how long have you been working with Exceed 3? Like, how long has that been operating?
Yes, I've officially got Exceed 3 off the ground in 2021. Like the end of 2021, we were kind of getting all the paperwork filed. 2022 is when I did the first class at the time with Catherine Sylvester. Again, love that woman. To get pre-PT students who have been accepted, start introducing them to topics that we saw that were difficult for some students to grasp. A lot of times that fusing like the anatomy and the kinesiology, it can be a little bit tough. Orthokinematics is a thing, and it's something that we need to know, but it can be tough to grasp on the front end. So introducing to some of the anatomy and really more so the rigor of what the expectations are. So she asked me, really at the start of the pandemic in 2020, to come up with a curriculum for a course, and we marketed that to a few students in Georgia just kind of as a pilot. And those students are about to have graduated. Most of them have graduated, I believe. And so really the goal, when we originally planned it, it's like, okay, we're going for mastery, which is tough when you don't have all of the resources and everything else. You don't have as many touch points throughout the week. You're still leaving a lot to the students. So really my goal with Exceed 3 was, one, how can we get that 3% better, which is slowly changing. But I mean, even looking at the other minority groups, because I don't just work with Black students, that is what the title is after, but I've worked with Latinx students, and any student who is a minority who is looking for assistance, I will talk to you. But what do your interview skills look like? What is your essay that you're putting forward? A lot of essays get thrown out for like little things, grammatical errors, not answering the question, like that kind of stuff. So can we make sure that you're putting forth your best application? And then from there, how can we prepare you for what you're about to walk into? I don't want you to walk in and be blindsided and drowning for the first 3 months because you didn't know how to study. You didn't know how you learned. You didn't know what to expect. Because I'm going to be honest, I was a student in undergrad. I did not study. I was a kid in high school, did not study. I didn't have to, it sounds very arrogant, but I did not have to. So going into a doctorate program, not knowing how to study is a problem. Don't get me wrong. I did fine. Not perfect. I did fine, but it is a problem if you don't know those things, and you don't know how to hold yourself accountable. Absolutely.
There's a learning curve. Yeah, and not only like learning how to study, like learning how to study at that intensity, right? Because like for my program, again, and as I mentioned before, like I was part of the charter class, meaning nobody else had done it before. So
Yep.
we're kind of like learning on the fly, just like the faculty and staff are learning on the fly. And the program at University of South Florida, like your first year, you're basically in med school and PT school, right? Because we took classes, and they still do to this day, as far as I know. Their first year, they're taking class with those first year med students. So you're doing all the med stuff over there, and then you come back to our building and do the physical therapy stuff. So to your point, like, yeah, I never, like, school was never necessarily hard for me. Like, I could study the night before in undergrad and be just fine, get enough to do what I needed to do. Same thing in high school. Well, I get to PT school, and I was like, oh, like, this is not what I'm accustomed to. There's much more information coming. And you're expected to digest it and be able to spit it back out in a much shorter time period. So it's all those kinds of things that you have to do. So to this day, how many students do you have in programs that you've personally had your hand in that?
So 4 of the 5 that we just finished class with are starting this year. We're around 10 from starting with our first like official class in 22. So around 10.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
pretty good. So Taylor, I am 18-year-old kid getting ready to go to apply to college, or I've applied to college, and well, I should probably say 20. Trying to go to DPT school, but I'm really nervous and I suck at interviews. How would you guide someone like me in preparing for an interview for a PT program?
We're gonna practice. Is what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
We're gonna practice. We're gonna get on a camera and just like this format, and we are gonna practice. And I'm gonna give you feedback. I'm gonna be like no feedback in the moment. We're gonna go through and ask the questions and let you stutter and but and all of the things. And then we're gonna do it again. And then we'll do it again if we need to. Interviewing is a conversation. So yes, you're gonna have jitters. I mean, you have jitters all through PT school, every competency, all that stuff. You can get used to that feeling. Like I'm fine with you having jitters. I want you to be able to articulate through that and get your point across and really show who you are, and make sure that the student knows how to best do that in a concise way. I tend to ramble, so knowing when to stop. I can hear it when it's happening. It's like, all right, well, back it up, and give that feedback. Or, okay, you've already expanded on this. Is there anything else that you can add? Like, I'm looking at, all these things on your application and your resume. You didn't touch on any of this stuff. Those are valuable things. Like, how can you bring that out a little bit more? And really just coaching people how to have a conversation. Because I mean, we're PTs. We get used to talking to people and interviewing, from the other side all day long, right? So how do you take that to helping a student figure out what's important?
Okay.
Tell me about your decision. So you go through the process, 3 years to get into PT school. You go through PT school. At what point does a residency become an option for you? And what was the thought process with that?
I'm a very competitive person. My thought process was I knew I wanted to be an ortho. I wanted to be able to walk into clinic on any given day and treat anything that came at me. And PT school, you're a generalist when you come out, so you're prepared for that to a degree. But I wanted to get more manual skills, and Mercer was not a program that like really hyped up residency. What I did notice that most of our faculty had done a residency or were fellows. That was something that stood out to me, and I liked the way that they thought. I like the way that they process through things. I like the way that they seemed to ask the right question. That was a really obscure question that meant a whole lot, but we didn't know why at the time. I like to know the why. So residency, probably, it was in my first year that I started like looking them up. just because I wanted to have that level of expertise. In hindsight, with how my brain works, I'm still grateful that I did it. Do think that this is probably a little bit controversial, but I had this conversation with someone who's affiliated with the residency program, or was listening to her perspective actually on what's the point, like what do you get from it? And yes, you get better reasoning, you get better hands-on skills, all of those things, but okay, it's another year, you're taking less pay. Who recognizes it? It doesn't do you any good, for at least in like the outpatient world. It doesn't do you any good amongst the MDs of the world for the most part. Some recognize it, some don't. So what does it mean? And I think for me, it was more of a personal choice of I want to be better, so I'm going to do better and learn. But it's not the end all be all, and it's not the most viable option for everyone.
Do you think your residency, having completed it and all of that, opened any doors that you possibly could not have opened without it?
I will say that I am currently a clinic director for the company that I work for because of me finishing my residency. I think knowing the positions that I held in APTA Georgia as a student and as a professional so far into my career, I had plenty of connections anyway, so potentially could have still gotten there, but it maybe happened on a faster scale. I can't really say. There were doors open because of it, but I was doing so much in other realms that I probably would have been fine either way.
I did a residency coming out of PT school. I did a sports residency. And I do agree with you. I don't think it's something that's viable for everybody. I think it's very specific, unique situations for individuals. You know, I've always said this when anybody's asked me, and I think I've said it, you know, in this forum and even on social media, like, you know, everybody's situation is different. At that time, you know, I was single. I didn't have anybody to be responsible for but myself. So I could afford to take a year and move to South Carolina, because that's where I did my residency, and take a little bit less money. You know, Alex now with married and 2 kids, absolutely not. You know, every situation is unique. But to answer the same question that I asked you, like, I feel like the residency for me did open doors that possibly would not have opened as fast or ever. You know, I was 1 year out of finishing my residency, and I was a faculty member at the University of South Florida. I was doing, you know, part clinical, part teaching, stuff like that, all stuff that I enjoyed. But to think that fast I would have been in that position without it, probably not. But yeah, like you know, like you said, what is the outcome? And I think that anybody that decides that they want to do one, they have to really dig deep as to what it is they're hoping to get out of it. Because if all you're trying to get out of it is some letters after your name,
it ain't worth it.
It ain't gonna work. It's not gonna make sense, because you can acquire those same letters maybe over a little bit longer time, but you can get there without having to sacrifice so much. But to, you know, like Mo said earlier, there's people that just, no matter what, they're willing to do and sacrifice everything to get whatever it is, whether it be a certain school or certain letters or whatever the case may be. But yeah,
I'll tell you now, the alphabet soup is not worth it.
Hey, people have priorities. So I never did a residency. I don't plan on doing one. I know people say generalist PT don't really know stuff, but I don't give a damn. I'm fine. I'm doing well. So, Taylor, do you only work with students in Georgia, or they can be anywhere in the U.S. or internationally?
Anywhere in the U.S. I haven't had any international students. Not opposed, just have to figure out the logistics of it. Right now, I have 2 students that I work with that are at St. Augustine in Austin. That's kind of the farthest that I have been like consistently communicating with students, because it's not something that I market, but I do tend to do some tutoring, just kind of personally through Exceed 3. So if I learn of a student who's either struggling to pass boards and like ortho is the area where they're struggling, or just in general, like not knowing how to approach it, and especially if you've had a few attempts where you're not getting that green pass circle, what can we do differently? So
I kind of wish I had
um,
you when I was taking mine initially.
yeah.
But how does one become part of the XC3 program?
A lot of times, it's people referring students to me. We do some like marketing on social media for like interviews when we're doing like an interview day, but really the inbox is open pretty much all the time. So if you want to shoot us an email, or um, if you go to our website, which is www.exceed3inc.com, or excuse me, .org, you will be able to, hi, Catherine. You will be able to submit a Google form that gives you access to either sign up for a mock interview with me or one of the board members, have someone um, look over your essay and, okay, does it flow like you think it flows? Does it make sense? Is it answering the question? Or are you just telling me the story you want me to hear? And then also sign up for the course. So all of that's available on the website.
Okay. And how long is the course usually?
So far, we've been keeping it at like 6 weeks. It's usually in the springtime. So students are getting that exposure right before they start in either the summer or the fall. My prerequisite has consistently been that you are accepted to a PT school. Um, I'm considering how we can modify and change the course a little bit. So right now it's 6 weeks. It's held in the spring, and I have different people to teach. So you get different perspectives. You get used to different teaching styles, and the fact that not everybody's going to stop and ask you, "Do you understand?" Sometimes you're just going to blow through the information, and you have to stop and ask questions and get comfortable doing that. So, yeah.
You mentioned that you're very competitive. Just
Correct.
listening to you, I can tell that you are, and I love it. Where does that come from? Like, what drives that in you? Like, I always like to say, in general speaking, like some people have it and others don't, right? And it's not something that you can necessarily teach.
I
No.
hope it doesn't go down the basketball lane talking about MJ and
So where does that come from for you?
I probably my brother. He and I are both pretty much the same. I guess maybe more so my dad. Um, I was the youngest and the only girl on my mom's side of the family. So my older brother and then 3 older cousins, all boys. I was rough. I had to be. I was a little rough. And I did not like to lose from a very young age. So it's always been there. And it's stuck with me. It's gotten me through 2 ACL rehabs and all of that stuff. So it's truly a mentality. It's a mindset, and yeah, I attribute that to my family for sure.
Is
My dad
anybody in
wasn't
your
letting us win.
is anybody in your family in healthcare, or are you the only one?
I'm the only one.
Okay.
I'm the only one.
Okay.
My brother is an engineer. My dad, essentially an engineer. He worked for Boeing for years and years. My mom was in insurance. So, yeah.
So did their experience or background help you at all in physical therapy, like running the business, getting their perspective?
Uh,
Engineers are
I
usually
was.
very analytical.
Oh yeah. Very much so. And I think my brain and my brother's brain work so differently. The same in a lot of respects, but so differently. So I love to pick his brain about like how he would break down a situation, not related to like any patient or anything like that, but just in life in general. I would say my mom spent a lot of time in leadership when she was in her insurance role. And so seeing, granted, we put a lot more emphasis on work-life balance now, but seeing how hard she worked and to work her way up in her 35 years with the same company was something that you don't take lightly. So I respect her for everything that she was able to accomplish and how much work she put into it. Her leadership is something to be reckoned with, is my understanding. So I never worked for her, but
you lived under her roof.
Well, yeah. So you can imagine. So I think from my mom, I got a lot of the leadership side of things. From my dad and my brother, a lot more of the analytical, like how to break things down and how to maybe take a step back and look at it a different way to try and figure it out. And I mean, it works very beautifully in healthcare, which I don't know. Shout out to the fam.
That's good. That's good. So I've been hearing chatter about admission into PT programs being done. We're seeing a lot of people leaving the profession after being in for a couple of years, whether it's burnout or they just want a change in something. Do you ever have some regret about encouraging students to pursue a PT degree, knowing that some are saying the return on investment is very little or next to nothing?
No, I don't regret it because my advice is very rarely, oh, you should go do PT. You have to go do PT. You have to do what's right for you and maybe take a step back and look at if this is feasible for you. If you're in it for the money,
you're already losing.
Correct. You should probably find another profession. And not to say that we are not compensated well. I make good money. I will tell you that.
Listen,
I'm not complaining about what I make.
Mo and I will be the first one to tell. Like, we tell people, like, yeah, you don't come into this for the money, but we're both very blessed to be in the positions that we are, and to be able to do the things we do and provide for our families and do all that stuff. So there is opportunity. It's just not, I graduated with a DPT, cut me a nice fat check. That's not how it works.
No. And I think just it takes for students to take a step back and look at the landscape of healthcare. If you don't know what's going on in your political landscape, it's a little crazy right now, but you should be aware of that because those lawmakers are making decisions that impact your reimbursement, that impact everything else. So be aware of what's going on, try and stay informed as best you can. Because that dictates a lot. And I do think that there is plenty of opportunity in PT, and I don't know that it always gets highlighted, but I know of a couple of folks who are only working PRN jobs. Granted, they don't have the best healthcare, but they're making probably $50K more than I am as a clinic director because PRN rates are wonderful right now. And so there's opportunity. You just have to know what you want to do and if you're willing to do or work in that area, or you're working in, maybe a more rural setting where they can pay you more because you're the only healthcare professional for the next, 100 miles, what do you want? You can choose to live in the city and work the job that, everybody wants, that they know they can pay you less because they can find somebody else to do it. Or you can maybe make a sacrifice or two, run your money up for a little bit, and then go into what you want. There's opportunity. It's just about how you look at it and what you want from your career. And so I don't have regret about talking to people. If you want to do PT, I'll give you my experience. That's all I can offer you is my perspective. And I'm going to start asking you a lot more questions than I'm answering and see, do you really want this?
What do you comment to students that you're working with in regards to like a support structure? Not professionally, but more personally. Like you've talked about the impact that your family has had on you. How much of that played a role in your going through your process? You know, all the obstacles that you've overcome and things that come up for you. How do you counsel your students about that if they have that support structure or they don't? You know, for me, and I've always said this, like I can't do this podcast with Mo. I can't do a lot of the things that I am able to do without my wife's support. You know, without those kinds of things. So what do you tell to those students and how important it is, and if you don't have that, how you can try to kind of substitute for something like that? Does that ever come up?
I can think of a couple times where it's come up where had a student who relocated to a different state and was looking for that support system that was there and local. She had gone to a HBCU. She felt like, you know, she was looking for, you know, her people, and her people weren't really like with her like that. Like they didn't see everything in the same way and didn't interact in the same way. And I think it again goes back to challenging that student to think differently. Where do you actually get your support from? Do you need that local support, or does it look different than maybe you thought it would? Maybe you have to think outside the box a little bit. And so, like, she's doing fine now, but it took a little bit of reframing. And I would always encourage you to, or any student, go back and look at one, why did you choose to go where you went? What is your why behind PT? Why are you there in the first place? Is it to make friends, or is it to like learn so you can get out of there? And are you a person that needs that support? Because if you are, you might not choose that school that's out of state in the first place. If that's your only option, cool. Can you wait a little bit longer? Or, okay, how do you find support? If they're comfortable with me, great. I will be checking in with you. If that's something that we agree to, I will be checking in with you. If you don't have the time right then, great. That's fine. Be able to communicate that. If you are looking for someone specific, I can try my best to use my network to get you somebody that can support you. Not going to say I'm going to be successful, but I can start asking questions. I'm really good at that. And see if there is some type of support system that's there and local. I've said a couple of times I've been involved in APTA Georgia for a bit, so I know that has led me to make connections with people in other APTA chapters and can start asking questions. Okay, I have somebody who maybe they're not in your state, but they might be willing to talk to you, and you might hit it off with them. And they, okay, if you don't, you can still build up your tribe because everybody's support system looks different. It doesn't have to be your family, it doesn't have to be your classmates. It could literally be anyone who has a vested interest in making sure you make it through. Maybe it's your professor. Have that conversation. Try and get to know them. Who knows who they know?
That's true. So Taylor, you
Yeah.
are with APTA Georgia. I've been
Mm-hmm.
with APTA Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I love Alex. He's like my brother from another mother, although my mother will probably claim him if she has to. But how do you convince someone like Alex to become involved with the professional organization?
You don't. You don't. For what? No, you don't. I think that my involvement and my continued involvement, I'm backing down from it some, but it was something that was emphasized to me as a student, and I saw the value in it. More so from like the legislative side. Do I participate in everything? In Georgia, I used to try. I don't anymore. But the money goes to helping us progress our profession. So if I can do that and, you know, maybe leave something a little bit better than I found it, great. By all means, I'll be involved. It also comes from like not seeing that many people who look like me in that space. And again, I'm competitive. So it's my goal to now make sure that it's somebody else at all times who looks like me. I don't think it gets enough credit how much representation matters. I know that everybody wants to talk about it with the EIA stuff and all the things, but having someone in a space that looks like you, even if they're the only one, it gives you a little bit of a sense of calm that probably wouldn't have been there otherwise. So I show up to things, may not like all of it, but I show up just to show, okay, there is a place for you here. It doesn't have to be APTA. There's plenty of other organizations that exist, but there's space for you. And I think that's where my drive for it comes from. I don't know. That I'm not going to try and convince anybody to.
I see she doesn't try to convince anybody to do anything. She just lets you act on your own free will. But
you know what though? Like that's the best way though.
Yeah.
Because anything as human beings that we're forced to do, we're going to fight back. It's just a natural reaction, right? Like, personally, my decision with the APTA simply came down to finances, and me not seeing the value in it, right? But that's my perception. Taylor's is different, Mo's is different. I felt that it just wasn't there for me. So for me to spend this money, I'd much rather spend it elsewhere. Even if somebody else may think like, well, you're going to spend X amount of dollars. Well, I bought a pair of Jordans. There's not value in it for the other person, but there is for me. Right. So that's purely what it came down to. I mean, a lot of people like to bash on the APTA and, oh, they haven't done this and they aren't doing this. Why aren't they doing reimbursement? I always challenge those people, just get to understand the process, right? Because it's always easy to sit on the sidelines and just complain and do stuff. So you either got to get involved, get educated, or both, right? Like you've got to figure stuff out before you can really have any kind of negative comments to put forth in the conversation. If you've done the work and then you still want to put your negative comments, then all right, at least you've done some of the legwork to say, hey, I've educated myself on this. Maybe not the greatest resource for it, but I've done a little education. So, we'll allow you to voice your opinion, which we're all entitled to. But yeah, it's real easy to just say, oh, the APTA this, the APTA that. They always want to tie reimbursement directly to what the APTA is or isn't doing. I mean, if it was really that easy, I think the APTA would be more in tune to say, hey, we need to make money for the profession. This would just make us look better, right? So it's clearly not that easy for those things to happen. But
and it takes a whole lot more money than what they have in a whole different bucket of funds. You got to be able to buy politicians, and I'm sorry, the AMA has a whole lot more money.
So, and even they're taking hits, right? So like,
correct.
Imagine us. they got deeper pockets and they're still taking hits. So, why would we think that us as PTs whom, you don't have the buy-in of the profession as a whole to support the organization, myself included, so you don't have that. So you don't have that kind of power behind the association, which if you don't have that, then it's kind of hard to have the money to go along with it. But then you have the AMA who has these things and they're still taking hits. So, it is damned if you do, damned if you don't, almost.
That's true. So Taylor, you mentioned earlier too that the numbers started increasing from 3 to 4 to 5%. Where do you see us being in 10 years?
Still low, not quite representative of what our actual population looks like. But I think it will probably be into the double digits. That's a loose goal. I mean, we've seen how it's taken a very long time to get 2 percentage points. And I think the more you see more programs popping up, you see more just shift in PT education in general. So I think that landscape will start to change. I don't know that it's sustainable, but I think it'll change.
Why do you say you don't think it's sustainable?
The pessimist in me thinks that a lot of it is performative, and that you see the intentionality behind. Like, I had a meeting with a university here in Georgia, and they were point blank asking me the question, how do we get more minority students to come here? What does your admission process look like? You tell me why you don't have minorities applying. I don't work there. And so it was, again, me asking them the questions. And so, like, yes, there's this intentionality behind it now, but that's because they want bodies and seats. And like you said before, the overall number of applicants is down. And if we're honest, they will take anybody in seat. They just want to make it look good and show that there's an effort being made. Do I think that's the primary reason they're asking? No, but I don't think there will be a continuous effort like there is now. I mean, again, that's the pessimistic side. The optimist in me says, oh, yeah, it'll be great. Realistically, I don't foresee there being the intentionality behind it for longer periods of time.
Is this, the Exceed 3 and everything that goes along with that, the representation and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Is this something that you see yourself doing till the day Taylor decides to hang it up from the professional world? Like, is this just like, if you've given yourself a timeline for this, like what is your thoughts behind it, and how, to your point of sustainability, like, because I feel like if we have people like yourself and multiply, right, and we mm-hmm. start getting more Taylor-like minds across different parts of the country and different programs and stuff like this, then I think that it can go. But if we don't have enough Taylors, and then the Taylors that we do have start to fizzle out or burn mm-hmm. out, or, priorities change, right? Like there could come a time where this isn't number one. It still may be top 3, but it's not number 1. Like, how do you kind of overcome those types of things?
Yeah, I think that's something that I've thought some into, and that's where having like people you can trust around you. So, like, this will always be something I say. I don't foresee that this will be something I continue to run. Like, you have to have a board in place. I would love to be able to shift this off to someone I trust, because competitive also don't trust many people. Love to be able to shift that to someone else, to be able to kind of take the reins and grow it. I've been in talks with like different like even my company, to see, okay, y'all have this wide ranging net, like what can y'all do? There's something you say you support and that you're behind, show me. And it's all kind of in the air. So I would love to be able to shift this off to, again, someone that I trust, but I would put that on like a 5-year timeline for me starting now. That's something I've been thinking more about this year after this most recent cohort. There needs to be someone, at least with like coordinating the course, and like there always needs to be someone who's more recent than when I went through it, because PTCAS has changed quite a bit from when I did it. And education is changing. There's a lot more that people are responsible for teaching themselves, which I think is silly if I'm going to pay that much money, but that's my opinion. So all of those things, I need people who are around me who are a little bit more, or a little bit closer to the education side of things. So I don't know, 5-year plan.
Cool. Okay. Do you collaborate with others who do this? I know that Mike Ucor in Maryland has something similar. So do you guys collaborate to help students?
The name is familiar. I haven't done any collaborations. I'm open to it. I'd love to talk to anybody who's willing to talk about kind of growing the profession. I've worked with Remy from NABPT, and we've kind of thrown around different ideas, and she sent me students multiple times. So there's always that opportunity, but I haven't done any like official collaborations. So.
Well, Alex and I, we network, we introduce people to people. That's our talent. So we can definitely connect you with Mike. And Mike, if you're listening, reach out to Taylor as well too. But Taylor, I hope like students that you've helped and that are closer to the PT CAS situation now can in the future pay back and become volunteers or workers for your program so that they can help others that are coming along, because I do believe in paying back and being a good mentor. And I really want to thank you for creating XC3. And I wish you guys all the best with everything. So if there's anything that Alex and I could do, let us know. We'll be happy to assist.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor, for taking the time to be with us tonight. Really do appreciate your time and obviously your knowledge and the wealth of information that you have. Which, like I said, I think having more young professionals like yourself in this profession is what we're going to need to kind of carry it where we all would like for it to go. Because, you know, Mo and I, we're not going to be you know, out here in doing this too much longer. I definitely want to be on the beach somewhere more full time. But yeah, I do think
so do I.
I think it's very evident that you're a go-getter. You've got that drive, you've got that determination, you've accomplished a good amount in a very short time in your young career. So kudos to you, man. Keep fighting, keep leading the way, because people like yourself are going to pave the way for those behind us and to help us get this profession to where we all feel like it needs to be. You know, I've always made mention before that we sit at kind of the kiddie table of the healthcare world, and I'd like for us to be more in these conversations at the grown folks table. So thank you again for your time. Thank you again for everything. Like Mo mentioned, if there's anything that we can do to help you help Exceed 3, please don't hesitate to reach out. And obviously any of our followers, watchers, first time guest of ours, please reach out to her if you guys know of someone who needs her help, because yeah, she's doing good things and big things in this profession. So thank you again.
And I want to
thank you guys for having me.
I want to shout out Catherine Denise Sylvester. I know you mentioned her a lot
Hey,
in the show today. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. And for leaving the comments as well too.
Thank
All right,
you.
everyone.
Everybody have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Bye.